They brought the girl in at sunrise. I remember the way the light poured through the upper dome windows, turning the sterile walls of the genetics wing into something almost holy. It should have been beautiful. But then the containment unit hissed open, and everything about that moment curdled inside me. She couldn't have been older than 8. Tiny. Pale. Her arms were strapped to her sides, her eyes wild and distant, like she'd been plucked out of a nightmare and dropped into another. The guards, standard council enforcers in full neural armor, moved like machines, silent and smooth, as if they weren't escorting a terrified child but transferring cargo. None of us spoke. We never did when the silent ones came in. That's what we called them. The anomalies. The undesigned. Children born outside the council's strict genetic framework. We weren't supposed to use that term, drifters, but everyone did behind closed doors. The council called them Category Delta instabilities, but that was just a cleaner way of saying mistake. I stood in the observation gallery, trying to breathe normally as the girl was guided into isolation chamber 3B. My hands were in my lab coat pockets, fingers balled into fists. My supervisor, Dr. Kellen, stood beside me, his expression unreadable. "She's active?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Kellen nodded. "Spontaneous psionic feedback. They found her in the upper settlements. Both parents dead. What happened to them?" He didn't answer. I stared through the reinforced glass, watching as the girl was sedated. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. That's what got to me the most. Her silence, like whatever she had inside her, had already burned through the part of her that could cry. I turned away, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't the work I had dreamed of. When I applied to the Council's Biogenetics Research Corps at 16, I thought I'd be building the future. Designing better crops, longer lives, smarter immune systems. But the longer I stayed, the more it all felt like control disguised as science. Especially with cases like hers. Kellen finally spoke. "We'll sequence her genome today. High priority directive. Ryan wants a full report on what triggered her mutation." Albert Ryan. I tried to keep my voice steady. He personally authorized the transfer. That chilled me more than I expected. When Ryan got involved, the subject rarely lived long. Not when he thought the anomaly posed a risk to the human gene pool. The girl's eyes flicked toward me then. I don't know how. The glass was mirrored on her side. She couldn't see me, but I swear she looked straight at me. Her gaze locked onto mine, and for a split second, just a second, everything else fell away. I wasn't standing in a lab. I wasn't a council intern. I was a child again, lost and afraid, standing in the ruins of the lower arcologies after the climate fall, watching the sky bleed ash while my mother called my name through the smoke. My knees buckled slightly, and I had to grip the railing. When I blinked, the moment was gone. The girl lay still on the table, the sedation taking full effect. "What the hell just happened?" "You all right?" Kellen asked. "Yeah, just didn't sleep much." He didn't push. No one did in this place. Curiosity was dangerous. Empathy even more so. I left the gallery and headed down the polished corridor, each step echoing like a gunshot in my head. My data pad vibrated with updates, lab schedules, genome metrics, briefing notes. But I ignored them. All I could think about was her eyes. That impossible connection. Like she'd reached into me. Like she knew. I didn't understand it yet. Not fully. But that was the moment everything began to unravel. And part of me already knew. I wasn't just watching the beginning of her story. I was watching the beginning of mine. I always liked working late. The labs were quiet after curfew, and the hum of the bio-servers became something like a lullaby, calming, steady, predictable. Most of the others on level 9 left by 1900, but I'd often stay long past that. I told myself it was for the work. Truth was, the silence helped me think. And sometimes I didn't want to go home. That night started like any other. I ran standard integrity tests on gene sequences stored in Vault Delta, genetic blueprints flagged as unstable by the Council. Most of them belonged to drifters. Normally, we weren't supposed to access those files unless given permission. But I had a backdoor. Everyone in research did, whether they admitted it or not. Curiosity is a powerful drug. I was running a cross-scan to look for pattern decay in one of the newer specimens. A young girl, about 8, with ocular chromatic shifts and an unusually high psionic index, when something strange happened. The interface glitched. For a moment, the screen flashed red. Then it displayed a new line of data. User match, Virek, Noah. Sequence correlation, 99.7%. I stared at it, not understanding. The system was comparing her DNA to mine. and it was saying we were nearly identical in the section marked Variant Drift A. That couldn't be right. I reran the scan. This time, I isolated my own medical file from the employee database and ran a blind alignment test against the flagged sequence. Same result, 99.7%. My fingers trembled slightly on the glass. I told myself it had to be an error, a misread, something in the system's neural indexing. I dug deeper. There it was, a fragment of code embedded in my personal genome sequence, tucked into a non-coding region, what they used to call junk DNA. Only it wasn't junk. It was a silent command line. A gate. One that had just started opening. A faint crackling sound hit my ears. At first, I thought it was static. I looked up, expecting to see a malfunction in the lights. But everything was still. No alarms. No flickering panels. Just the server hum and my heartbeat. Then I noticed my mug. It sat on the desk beside my hand, half full of synth coffee. Slowly, almost lazily, it began to slide toward me, then away. Then it shook. Not violently, but like it was reacting to something under the surface. I backed away. My breath caught. My body felt heavy, like the air around me had thickened. My skin prickled with a strange electricity, and for a second, the edges of the lab looked sharper, brighter, colors blooming where there should have been none. Time seemed to stretch, like a rubber band being pulled tight, and then just as fast, it all stopped. The mug settled. The lights went dim again. The world snapped back to normal. I dropped into the nearest chair, chest heaving. My hands were ice cold. I stared at them, half expecting to see them flicker out of existence or explode. A knock echoed from the main entrance of the lab. Not a soft one. A hard, deliberate bang 3 times. No one knocks. Not here. Not this late. I stood, trying to act like I wasn't panicking, and crossed to the security console. The hallway camera feed showed 2 council enforcers in black armor. Behind them stood someone I knew far too well. Dr. Howrick, my mentor. He wore his usual lab coat, but there was something in the way he stood, rigid, like a statue carved out of regret. His eyes didn't blink. They knew. Somehow, someway they knew. I backed away from the door before they could override the lock. There wasn't much time. I grabbed my data pad, yanked the portable gene drive from the console, and shoved it into my coat. My hand brushed against my chest, and I felt it again. A pulse. Not from my heart. From something else. Deeper. Older. Waking up. I whispered under my breath, "What the hell am I?" Then I ran. Out the emergency exit, down the utility corridors, into the skin of the city where shadows didn't need names. And behind me, for the first time in my life, I wasn't just running from people. I was running from who I might become. I remember the silence first. Not the kind you find in a quiet room or a forgotten corridor. No, this silence was thick, like the whole world had paused to take a breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. I stood in the main hall of the biopurity wing, my palms sweating as I clutched the data pad tighter than necessary. My heart was pounding, but I tried to look normal. Calm. Invisible. A soft chime echoed down the corridor, announcing an incoming drone team. Too late. The hall lights dimmed for a moment, then flared bright blue, standard protocol when a security breach was underway. But I wasn't the breach. I was the target. Subject Virek located. Neutralize if non-compliant. I didn't wait for them to finish the sentence. I turned and ran. Footsteps. Metallic clanks. A sound like wings unfolding. The enforcer drones were fast, too fast. I cut down a side hallway, breath ragged, mind spinning. My thoughts slammed against each other, screaming the truth I'd only just begun to accept. I'm one of them. A drifter. Whatever mutation had been hidden in my blood, it was waking up now, loud, angry, and raw. My body felt too light, like gravity had stopped fully working on me. My fingertips buzzed like static, and the edges of the hallway shimmered faintly, as if the air itself was glitching. A warning shot cracked past my ear, searing a line of heat across the wall. Stop! You are under council quarantine. The hallway ahead curved sharply, and without thinking, I dove into a service chute panel on the left. It slammed behind me, and I was tumbling through darkness, bouncing off metal rails until I hit the bottom, hard. I groaned. My vision spun. The walls around me pulsed dim green, emergency lighting flickering on. I was in the waste management tunnels. Biorecycling levels. The smell was thick with rot and chemicals, but at least it was quiet. I forced myself up, limping, head pounding. Somewhere above, the drones were still scanning. I had minutes, maybe less. I checked my pulse. Fast. Too fast. My vision blurred again, but not from pain, something else. The edges of my hand looked wrong, like they were vibrating. And then suddenly the world shifted. Not dramatically, not with noise or light, but the tunnel around me bent. For just a heartbeat. As if I had blinked and the universe blinked back. I was no longer standing at the base of the chute. I was 10 steps ahead, standing in a corner I hadn't yet reached. I froze. My breath caught. What the hell just happened? I stumbled backward, no forward, my orientation was off. The world clicked back into place. My hand gripped the wall. It was solid, cold, real. A whisper echoed in my ears. My own voice. But I hadn't spoken. Not a glitch. A drift. The word hit me like a stone dropped into deep water. Drift. So that's what they meant. That's what the term wasn't just scientific jargon for anomalies. It was something real, something terrifying. A shift. A slippage through space or time or both. And I was doing it. I didn't have time to understand it. I had to run. Farther. Deeper. I moved, not caring where I was going anymore, just down. I followed the tunnels past growling steam vents and abandoned maintenance hatches, until I reached a grated floor that opened into complete darkness below. Below the city. Below the labs. Below everything I had ever known. My legs trembled. My body felt light again, like I might float off into space. I gripped the edge of the platform and stared down. Somewhere under all of this, there were people like me. The ones the council couldn't control. The ones they called monsters. Errors. Drifters. I was one of them now. So I let go. I dropped into the dark, and for the first time in my life, I stopped running from who I was, and started drifting toward what I might become. When I woke up, my body ached like I'd been dragged across steel. My head throbbed in dull pulses, and the air tasted of metal and damp earth. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. All I could hear was a slow, rhythmic drip nearby and the faint hum of machinery, old and breathing like something alive. I tried to sit up, but groaned as pain lanced through my side. A shadow moved across my blurred vision. Then a face appeared, young, sharp, serious. "You're lucky to be alive," she said. Her voice was low, almost cautious. She crouched beside me, her dark eyes scanning my face like she was still deciding whether to trust me or not. I didn't answer right away. I was too busy trying to remember how I got here. The escape, the drones, the tower lights, my powers slipping loose. Then blackness. "I pulled you out after the blast," she said. "You were bleeding bad. We almost left you. Why didn't you?" I rasped, my throat dry like sand. She shrugged. "Mira said you were different." She stood and moved into the dim light. We were in what looked like a tunnel, old utility lines running along the ceiling, patched with glowing cables that pulsed softly. Makeshift beds lined the floor, and worn crates sat in the corners like furniture. The place smelled like oil, sweat, and something earthy I couldn't name. "Where am I?" I asked. "The downside," she said without turning. "The belly of the city, where the council doesn't bother checking anymore. Too much trouble." I tried to sit up again, slower this time. My side was wrapped in a smart bandage, humming gently as it stitched me together. I looked around. Others were here, watching, quiet. Their eyes glinted in the dark, some curious, some cautious, one or two just angry. Then I saw her. She stood at the far end of the room, hand resting on the curved wall, like she was listening to the city's pulse through it. When our eyes met, I felt something shift inside me, like a current pulling just beneath the surface. "That's Mira," the first girl said, following my gaze. "She's the one who told us to keep you alive." Mira walked toward me, calm and quiet. Her presence was different, still, but heavy, like the silence before a storm. "You're Noah," she said. Not a question. I nodded. "You worked in the tower," she added. "In research. Under Rhine." The room grew colder, or maybe that was just me realizing how much they knew. "I didn't know what they were doing at first," I said quickly. "I thought we were helping people. Fixing mutations. Preventing genetic decay." "They were killing us," she interrupted. Not angry. Just final. I had no answer for that. Mira knelt beside me, watching me with those wide, unreadable eyes. Then she reached out and touched my hand. Just a fingertip to my skin. Suddenly, I wasn't in the tunnel anymore. I was falling. But not through space, through time, through memory. Flashes. A boy screaming in a bright white room. Albert Rhine standing over a pod, his face twisted in grief. Another scene, Mira, younger, being chased through narrow streets by drones. her hands glowing with light she couldn't control. Pain, fear, rage, and underneath it all, a loneliness so deep it burned. I gasped and yanked my hand back. The connection snapped, and I was in the tunnel again, panting. "What was that?" I whispered. "My ability," Mira said softly. "I can walk through memories. Yours. Mine. His." She looked at me carefully. "You've seen things too, haven't you? Since your genes activated. Echoes. Fractures." I nodded slowly. I hadn't told anyone. Not even myself. She stood. "We're all different," she said. "No two drifters are alike. Some control flame. Some bend metal. Some walk through dreams or erase sound. But they call us unstable. Dangerous. Because we are," someone muttered from the shadows. A tall boy stepped forward, muscular, with firelight flickering just beneath his skin. "That's Kale," Mira said. "He doesn't like outsiders." Kale crossed his arms and stared at me. "Especially ones who used to work for the butcher." "I didn't know," I said again. But even I could hear how weak that sounded. He scoffed and turned away. Mira stepped between us. "We need to know what Ryan is planning. Noah has that knowledge. And we're supposed to trust him?" Kale snapped. "He shows up half dead, full of secrets. How do we know he's not bait?" The others murmured. Doubt hung thick in the air. I stood, legs shaky, and faced them all. "I'm not asking for trust," I said. "I'm asking for a chance to make it right." They looked at me. At each other. No one spoke. Then Mira said, "Let him stay. For now." And that was how I became part of the downside. Among the exiled, the hunted, the broken. The ones like me. The ones who had drifted too far from what the council called human. And maybe the ones who would change everything. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up. It was dark in the old freight car, the ceiling low and the walls pulsing with faint blue mold light. The air smelled like metal and damp skin. My shoulder ached from where I'd been thrown during the last chase, but my mind felt invaded. Mira sat across from me, her pale eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. She was still holding my hand. That was the last thing I remembered, her fingers touching mine, warm and strange. The moment her skin met mine, I had fallen straight into someone else's past. Not a dream. A memory. Someone else's truth. "It worked," she said softly, letting go. Her voice was tired but steady. "You saw him, didn't you?" I nodded, but the words stuck in my throat like a swallowed stone. Albert Rhine. The man who'd mentored me. Who patted my shoulder when I solved code strings and called me brilliant like it mattered. I saw what he buried. His pain, his fury. The moment he snapped and decided the human genome was his to control. He wasn't born cruel. He was broken into it. The memory started in a house. I recognized the style, old earth architecture, maybe 2 centuries out of date. Bookshelves lined with dusty volumes. Digital frames flickering between family photos. I could smell lemon soap and wood polish. A child's laughter echoed from the next room. And then I saw her. A girl. Blonde. Maybe 8. Her name. My mind whispered it without meaning to. Alice. Albert's daughter. She sat in a corner, drawing something with a thick black stylus. Her skin shimmered in the light. Not glitter or paint. It was changing. Her arms flickered between normal flesh and a silvery, translucent form, like glass being filled with stars. Then she screamed, not out of pain, but fear. Her fingers twisted backward and her chest convulsed. Albert ran in, scooping her up, shouting for help. But no one came. It was too fast. Her body glitched, blinking in and out like corrupted data. And then she was gone. Not dead. Just gone. Dispersed. Erased by her own genes. He fell to the ground and screamed her name like it was a spell that might bring her back. That's when it began. I saw years pass like chapters flipping. Albert pouring himself into code, research, theories. He created entire branches of genome law, developed the first correction algorithms. He testified before the early council, showing images of Alice and warning of an evolutionary fracture that would destroy us all. People listened. Fear is louder than facts. He wasn't trying to save the world. Not really. He was trying to fix one mistake he couldn't accept, that his own daughter evolved too far, too fast, and he couldn't stop it. So now no one else would be allowed to try. I pulled my hand away from Mira, heart thudding. My throat was dry. I felt like I'd just lived an entire life that wasn't mine. He lost her, I whispered. Mira looked away. He lost his humanity with her. I stood up, pacing the narrow space. My powers buzzed beneath my skin, tense and out of sync. Project Tabula, it's not just a reset button. It's personal. He's trying to erase the possibility of anyone like her ever existing again. Exactly, Mira said. He wants a species with walls. Predictable, clean, safe. But evolution doesn't work that way, I muttered. It doesn't ask permission. I thought of all the kids like Alice, like me. Buried, hidden, altered, or burned because someone like Albert Rhine decided the human race had to stay on a leash. I turned to Mira. We have to stop him. She nodded slowly. We will. But it won't be with facts and sympathy, Noah. He doesn't feel those anymore. I looked down at my hands, still trembling faintly from the memory. I didn't know if I was more afraid of Albert, or of how much I understood him now. Outside, a wind stirred the old city tunnels. Somewhere far above us, preparations for Project Tabula were accelerating. Albert was going to rewrite the genome of every living human on Eos Prime in a single pulse. And we had less than 5 days to stop it. The air inside the old hydro tunnels was heavy with heat and silence. We were packed into what used to be a filtration hub, now just a dim metal room filled with wires, cracked consoles, and bodies that moved like shadows. The only sound was the quiet hum of recycled power and the occasional spark from an old light panel that refused to die. I sat on a low bench, arms resting on my knees, staring at the floor while Mira treated a burn on my wrist. It wasn't deep, but it hurt like hell. Kale had thrown a chair across the room during our last training round. It hadn't been personal, but it sure felt like it. Focus next time, Kale had snapped. Your head's in the clouds, genius. He wasn't wrong. It had been days since we discovered Albert Rhine's plan, and all I could think about was the countdown. 5 days left. 5 days until Project Tabula would erase people like me from existence. You're shaking, Mira said, voice soft as she wrapped the bandage. You haven't eaten. I looked at her, eyes like cooled starlight, hands steady even though her skin was marked with the faint glow of her evolving blood. I'm fine, I lied. No, you're not. I didn't answer. She finished tying the wrap and sat beside me, close but not touching. For a long moment, neither of us said a word. The others were gathered near the central table, voices rising. Kale was standing, pacing back and forth with too much energy for someone who hadn't slept either. This is simple, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. We break in, we kill Rhine, we shut it down. 1 shot to the skull, and the nightmare ends. Some of the drifters, maybe half, nodded in agreement. They'd been hunted, tortured, stripped of names, and turned into test numbers. They didn't believe in negotiations. Only in payback. I stood. You don't know what'll happen if we just kill him. He's the head, but not the whole machine. We need to expose him, not just eliminate him. Kale turned to me slowly. You really think they'll listen? You think the people on the surface will suddenly grow a conscience when they see what he's done? Yes, I said. Or maybe not. But if we kill him, we give them another reason to call us dangerous. We become exactly what they say we are. Kale took a step closer, his firelit eyes narrowing. And if we wait, if we talk, if we play nice, what then? He flips a switch and all of us vanish? No, I replied, my voice shaking. Not if we get to the tabula core. I can rewrite the pulse. Change it. I've studied it. I know how it's built. He scoffed. You built this nightmare with him, Noah. You helped them hunt us. Now you want us to trust you to save us. That one cut deep. Deeper than I expected. I didn't know, I said quietly. But I do now. And I'm trying to fix it. Kale looked away for a moment, jaw clenched tight. His powers always flared when he was angry. I could feel the warmth on my face from across the room. Mira stood between us. Enough, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the room. We don't have time for this. We need to choose a path, and we need to stick to it. Then vote, Kale said. Now. It wasn't formal, but it was clear. Half raised their hands to support the kill mission. The other half looked to me. Mira didn't vote. When everyone left the room, she stayed. I remained where I was, watching the flicker of a broken console light dance across the walls. You knew this would happen, I said. She nodded. Kale doesn't trust easily. Especially not those with clean hands. I don't think mine are clean anymore, I muttered. She turned to me then. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, sadness, maybe, or something deeper. You're changing, she said. I let out a breath. You mean evolving? No, she said. Becoming. I didn't respond. Later that night, I stood alone at the edge of the underzone, staring up through a crack in the ceiling where the stars peeked through. Somewhere above, Rhine was preparing to reshape humanity with a button press. Below, we were breaking apart. and I didn't know which scared me more. The night was thick with silence, the kind that presses against your skin like a cold weight. Mira was weak, lying on the cracked concrete floor of our hideout, her breath shallow and uneven. I held her hand, feeling the faint pulse beneath her skin, a strange glow, almost like she was changing from the inside out. But there was no time to dwell on it. We were running out of time, and worse, we were about to be betrayed. I didn't want to believe it when Kale pulled me aside earlier that evening, his face grim and eyes dark with worry. "Noah," he said, voice low, "someone in the Enclave has been talking. The council knows about our plans. They're coming." My stomach dropped, cold and heavy. How? We had been so careful. Every movement, every word we thought was locked tight. But the truth hit me harder than any blow. There was a Judas among us, a traitor. I searched their faces, those I trusted. Each one looked back with the same fear, the same desperation. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words stuck in my throat. Betrayal wasn't new in this world. It was survival. The council's enforcers came like shadows in the dark, silent but deadly. The moment they struck, chaos exploded. We were caught off guard, trapped in a cage that had once been our sanctuary. The Enclave's walls echoed with the shouts and screams of those fighting and falling. Kale fought with the fury of a storm, every punch and kick a testament to his fire. But they overwhelmed him. I saw him go down, grabbed by cold hands that showed no mercy. His eyes met mine, burning with defiance, a silent promise that this wasn't the end. Mira, despite her weakness, tried to help. She reached out to one of the attackers with trembling hands, but the moment she touched him, a sudden shock pulsed through her. She stumbled back, gasping, clutching her chest. Her blood shimmered faintly in the dim light, an otherworldly glow that both terrified and fascinated me. I had to get us out. Carrying Mira felt like carrying a flame barely flickering in the wind. Every step was a struggle against exhaustion and fear. The world outside was no safer, but inside those crumbling walls, death was certain. As we moved through the labyrinth of tunnels beneath Eos Prime, Mira whispered, "Noah, something is changing. I can feel it deep inside me." I didn't know what to say. All I knew was that the fight was far from over. The council was hunting us, and now, with betrayal cutting into our ranks, the path ahead was darker than ever. But I would not give up. Not now. Not ever. Because if we fell, so would the last hope for the children of the stars. And I wasn't ready to let that happen. The council tower rose above the city like a steel monolith, its sharp edges cutting into the smoky sky. I stood at the edge of the outzone, looking up at the building that had shaped my entire life, and now threatened to end it. Tonight, everything would change. Mira sat beside me, her breathing shallow, her face pale but calm. She reached out and took my hand. "You were built to unlock the system, not destroy it," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. I didn't fully understand what she meant, but I held on to her words like a lifeline. Kale wasn't with us. The council had him locked away, probably running him through their endless tests. I felt the weight of his absence like a stone in my chest. Without him, the Enclave felt fractured, vulnerable. But there was no turning back. I checked my gear for the 10th time. Simple tools, a few makeshift weapons, and the small device Mira had helped me create, a code breaker designed to override the council's security systems. I hoped it would work. I had to believe it would. We moved in silence through the winding tunnels beneath the city, hidden from the glow of the surface world. The air was thick with the smell of damp metal and earth, a reminder of the life that still clung to the forgotten places. Myra's hand tightened around mine. Despite her injuries, she refused to slow down. At the base of the tower, I could feel the pulse of the security fields, a low hum that vibrated through the soles of my boots. This was the moment when everything could go wrong, but also the moment when I had to be everything I was meant to be. Using my phasing ability, I slipped through the outer barrier like a shadow melting into the night. Time felt different inside, stretched and warped. My heartbeat slowed, each breath measured. I could see faint glimmers ahead, guards patrolling with cold, mechanical precision. I focused on their patterns, waiting for the perfect moment. The corridor stretched before me, a tunnel of sterile white light and steel. I moved with purpose, stepping lightly, phasing just enough to avoid detection. Every second was a gamble, every breath a whispered prayer. Ahead, the security door loomed, the gateway to the heart of the council's power. I pulled the device from my pack and placed it against the panel. The screen flickered, codes flashing faster than I could read. My fingers trembled, but I forced them steady. Then a soft beep. The door slid open. Inside was the control chamber, an enormous room filled with glowing consoles and a central platform where the Project Tabula device waited. It was smaller than I imagined, but the energy radiating from it was almost unbearable, like standing too close to a star. Albert Rhine stood there, his face sharper than I remembered, eyes cold and calculating. "You're too late, Noah," he said. His voice echoed around the room, filled with the certainty of a man who believed the world belonged to him. "This ends tonight." I stepped forward, feeling the power inside me pulse in response. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a battle for the future of all of us, the children born with powers beyond imagination, the ones the Council wanted to erase. Myra's words came back to me. I was built to unlock the system. And now it was time to prove it. The air inside the Council Tower was thick with cold metal and quiet alarms humming somewhere deep in the walls. I moved through the corridors like a shadow, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might give me away. Mira had said this was the moment I was built for, not to destroy, but to unlock. I hoped she was right. The control chamber loomed ahead, a cathedral of blinking lights and screens pulsing with a strange, hypnotic rhythm. At its center, a massive device hummed, a lattice of glowing strands twisting and folding in patterns I could barely understand. Project Tabula. Albert Rhine stood beside it, tall and rigid, his eyes sharp with the kind of cold certainty only fear could build. He saw me before I spoke, and his face curled into something like pity mixed with anger. "You've come far, Noah," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "But this ends here. You don't understand what's at stake. If this device fails, our entire civilization will crumble into chaos." I stepped forward, the weight of every life I'd seen stolen by the Council pressing on me. "Chaos isn't the enemy, Albert. It's the only way we grow. You want to cage evolution, but you can't control it." He shook his head slowly. "I'm saving humanity. You're a product of its failures, a dangerous anomaly. This device will reset the genome, wipe the slate clean. No more mutations, no more drifters." His words felt like a punch to the gut. I was one of those mutations. But I wasn't broken. I was more than that. The machine began to pulse faster, the glow intensifying until it filled the room with a blinding light. I felt the edges of reality start to ripple, the timeline bending and folding around me. Albert's hand hovered over the activation switch. I knew if I didn't act now, everything would be lost. Drawing a shaky breath, I focused all my power, feeling the familiar hum of my phasing ability building inside me. The room blurred, and I slipped out of sync with time itself, moving forward a few precious seconds. With that gap, I reached the core of the machine, my hands glowing with energy. The lattice pulsed violently as I touched it, but instead of shutting it down, I sent a new command, a rewrite. The device stuttered, its deadly pulse shifting from erasure to amplification. Albert's scream echoed through the chamber, a sound of pure rage and disbelief. "You don't know what you're doing," he shouted, but it was too late. The machine's glow spread outwards, enveloping us both in waves of light and power. I felt something change deep inside me, a surge of strength, of freedom I'd never known. When the light faded, Albert was slumped against the console, defeated. The Council's grip had broken. I stood there, breathless but alive, knowing the future had shifted forever. We were no longer prisoners of our genes. We were the children of the stars, born not to be controlled, but to soar. The control chamber was cold and humming, lights flickering with an unnatural rhythm that made my skin crawl. Albert stood before the core of Project Tabula, fingers poised over the console, like a conductor ready to unleash a devastating symphony. His eyes were sharp, filled with the same desperate resolve I had seen before, but now edged with something darker, fear of losing everything he thought he was protecting. I took a breath, feeling the strange pull of the chamber's energy. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the raw power coursing just beneath my skin. I wasn't just a man anymore. I was a node in this living network of genetic possibility, a bridge between what humanity was and what it could become. Albert's voice broke the silence. "You don't understand what's at stake, Noah. This pulse will cleanse the genome, reset the balance. Without it, we fall into chaos. Evolution without control is destruction." I stepped forward, my gaze steady despite the storm inside me. Evolution is chaos, yes, but it's also freedom. It's choice, growth. It's the chance to be more than the cages you build. He sneered. "Freedom? You call this freedom? You're an anomaly, a threat. The world needs order, or it falls apart." His fingers moved, activating the countdown. The chamber thrummed louder, the air thickening as the pulse prepared to fire. Time felt like it slowed around me, a strange clarity sharpening my senses. I reached out, feeling my body shift, flicker, phasing through moments ahead, seeing the cascade of failure if I did nothing. I touched the console, feeling its cold metal beneath my fingertips. But instead of shutting it down, I let my mind reach inside the code, like slipping through strands of light and shadow woven deep in the machine's core. I could feel the pulse's intent, its violent erasure of difference. But I also saw a path, a way to rewrite its purpose. I rewrote the pulse. Instead of erasing anomalies, it would amplify them. Instead of suppressing, it would unlock the potential buried in every gene. The project designed to erase us was becoming a beacon for those like me, the drifters, the children of the stars. Albert's face twisted in disbelief and fury as the core began to pulse differently, the machine singing a new song, one of transformation. "No!" he shouted, lunging toward the console, but I was faster. My body slipped through space, phasing past his grasp, and I pressed my hands firmly against the control panel. The pulse erupted outward, a wave of shimmering light and energy flooding through the facility, bursting into the sky beyond. I felt it ripple through me, the awakening of every dormant cell, the unlocking of countless secrets hidden in DNA. Outside, I knew the world would never be the same. Fear would turn to wonder. Control would give way to possibility. Albert staggered back, defeated, his empire crumbling as the Council's control systems failed one by one. But I didn't feel triumph or hatred. I felt hope, a fragile, glowing ember. As the energy settled, I looked to the stars through the chamber's wide windows. The stars were no longer distant pinpricks of light. They were the birthplace of something new, something alive in me and in all those who would come after. We were not mistakes, not errors to be erased. We were evolution in motion, the children of the stars. And this was only the beginning.